It's Wednesday, January 29th. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and I want to welcome the over 13,000 new subscribers to this channel. My name's Juan Brown. I've been flying for over 40 years, civilian, military, Air Force, and 20 years with a major airline here in the United States based out of Los Angeles. Right seat on the 777. I'm currently on a temporary medical leave, waiting to get my paperwork straightened out with the FAA before I can get back to flying. All my experience is fixed wing flying. I've got a very close friend. We both started our aviation career together. He went the rotor wing route. We're going to have him tomorrow. Scott's going to show up tomorrow. We're going to have an in-depth discussion about the latest on the Kobe Bryant crash in Southern California and helicopter operations in general tomorrow, Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Today I want to discuss more about what we learned from the NTSB briefing from yesterday. You could just see the frustration in the eyes of Jennifer Homendy, the spokesperson for the NTSB that was doing the briefing yesterday. As she said the day before, we've been doing this for a very long time, and this accident is shaping up to be very similar to many previous accidents, particularly in helicopter operations, a VFR pilot or a VFR flight entering inadvertently instrument conditions, or IMC conditions. From the briefing yesterday, we confirmed that this flight reached an altitude of about 2,300 feet just prior to the crash, and the wreckage was found at the 1,085-foot elevation in the hills there in Calabasas, a drop of nearly 1,200 feet in altitude. The wreckage appears initially to the NTSB. They found all four corners, so to speak, of the aircraft. That is, they found the nose, the tail, and the rotor blades such that it appears at this point to the NTSB that the aircraft was in fact in one piece when it impacted the ground. The impact zone does appear to be a very high energy state impact. So the aircraft was descending at a high rate of speed and did also have some forward velocity upon impact. Now, a couple of takeaways that the media ran with this that may or may not pertain. One is the impact elevation of 1,085 feet was a mere 30 feet from the top of this one particular knoll that the helicopter crashed in. Remember, there's surrounding terrain, and one of the other NTSB guys clarified this. There's surrounding higher terrain. So the fact that he just missed the top of this one knoll by 30 feet really means little or nothing. We also learned that the pilot in command of the helicopter at the time has a total of 8,200 hours, or at least he did back in June, probably more time since then. He had over 1,250 hours in the S-76 helicopter over the last 10 years. And he was also chief pilot for the operation that the helicopter was being leased from. And we learned today that this flight was being operated under FAR Part 135. Remember, there's three basic parts to the FARs. You got Part 91 operations, which governs the operation of general aviation. You have Part 135, which governs the operations under charter or flight for hire, not scheduled operations. And then you have FAR Part 121, which regulates the airline industry. Each of those different layers of regulations represents a stricter level of regulation. Much of the frustration that Jennifer was expressing yesterday was with their relationship with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. Remember, the NTSB only investigates accidents and is a great service to the entire aviation community, as we all learn a tremendous amount of information from each of these accident investigations. But then they can only make recommendations to the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, to act upon that which they have learned from these accidents. And from this, the NTSB has created a most wanted list of demands that they would like to see the FAA do to change regulation to make aviation safer. In the infamous quote years ago by Mary Schiavo, she called the FAA out, calling them the tombstone agency, that they only seem to act until enough people die from the same cause before regulations are changed. And this will be a historic aviation accident, and I'm sure will eventually result in some form of aviation regulation change for the entire industry, though it may take years before these changes are finally implemented. The FAA is a government bureaucracy, but it also has to move slowly and deliberately and account for anything outside of the event of an emergency airworthiness directive. It has to account for the costs of any additional regulations and what that will mean to the industry before they can implement such regulations. The whole process takes time. Two things that Jennifer pointed out in this latest NTSB briefing that the NTSB has been hounding the FAA to try to get them to change, but they've had no success so far. One is terrain avoidance warning systems. This aircraft in this crash did not have a terrain avoidance warning system on board the aircraft. Whether it made a difference or not, we'll talk about in a minute. Terrain avoidance warning system, the NTSB has been requesting that the FAA require this all the way back since 2004 on all turbine helicopters that have 6 or more seats. And this helicopter would have fit that situation. And this was the result of a 2004 accident in Galveston, Texas, result from a similar helicopter, an S-76A, that resulted in 10 fatalities. And then Jennifer pointed out a 2005 accident of another S-76 helicopter in the Baltic Sea, where they had petitioned that the FAA change the regulations to require that all helicopters operating under Part 91 and Part 135 have both a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder on board the aircraft. The aircraft in this accident had neither. So what if a terrain avoidance warning system helped in this particular accident? We're going to discuss this more tomorrow in depth with Scott, the professional helicopter pilot. A basic terrain avoidance warning system that meets minimum FAA requirements can often produce nuisance warnings, especially in the low-level environment of a helicopter. You need a terrain avoidance warning system that's specifically designed for helicopters, or HTAWS, helicopter TAWS system, that accounts for the type of flying environment that a helicopter is in. And you can ratchet that HTAWS all the way down 500, 200 to 100 feet for warning information. By ratcheting it down, you can ratchet down the voice commands. You can mute the voice commands to 100 feet or less. You'll always have a visual display. Whether a terrain avoidance warning system would have prevented this accident is debatable. This pilot knew already that he was operating very low to the terrain. That's why he was climbing the way he did at the end of the data to 2,300 feet, inadvertently entered the clouds. He knew he needed to climb away from the terrain, and he was getting safely away from the terrain. But based on eyewitness accounts of the final moments of this flight, it's beginning to sound very much like this pilot lost control of the helicopter. He failed to maintain aircraft control while on instruments, making this emergency transition, in which case TAWS would not have helped. Which brings up the point that, in my opinion, this accident is going to come down to, once again, a matter of training. Instrument training for helicopter pilots, instrument training for VFR pilots upon entering IMC. This is a long-running problem in aviation. One other thing I hope NTSB investigators look at through interviews with local pilots, with local knowledge, and the company pilots, this pilot knew this route very well, and along the vein of always leaving yourself a way out. It's come to my attention, thanks to some of your comments on these videos, that there is a sheriff's helipad located within 1 mile of where this crash took place. And we're trying to answer the question as to why did this pilot make a left turn towards rising terrain. Well, I hope investigators investigate to see if maybe was this pilot trying to find that sheriff's helipad located just to the left of Highway 101. Did the pilot perhaps mistake the road that he was flying down for the road that this helipad was located on? I'll show you on the maps here what I'm talking about. The pilot came within 1/2 of a mile of a safe landing spot there at the sheriff's helipad. Was that part of his plan? Was that part of his idea? Because we have no data recorder or no voice recorder, we may never get the answer to this. Here's a picture of the actual flight path of 72 Echo X-ray. Here's the location of the sheriff's helicopter landing pad just off to the left of Highway 101, to the south side of 101. Here's the screenshot of the actual final moments of the flight path. And here's the location of the sheriff's helipad in orange. Here's a closer look at what that helipad looks like. The distance between the crash site and this helipad is a little over 1 mile. To folks outside of the industry, a lot of these technological changes sound very simple using today's technology. Remember, any change to the technology regarding aircraft needs to be FAA approved. So the component needs to be FAA approved, the installation needs to be FAA approved, and the training and the operation of the equipment all needs to be FAA approved. This takes time. We'll have more on this conversation tomorrow, Thursday. See you here.